Resin makes spectacular modeled water, but those edges often ruin the illusion. The resin creeping up everything it touches immediately screams, "Not real!" Today, we're going to see if we can fix that problem. The reason this creep, or meniscus, happens has to do with the surface energy of materials. If the surface energy of the material is higher than that of the resin, it attracts and forms a meniscus. If it's lower, it repels and the resin beads up. We want to find some materials or treatments that have about the same surface energy as epoxy resin, which is about 45. I can hear you asking, 45 what? That would be 45 dynes per centimeter. Now that that's cleared up, let's find some materials. These are the things I found and we'll be testing today. Acrylic, matte acrylic varnish, polyvinyl acrylate, in other words PVA glue 50% diluted with water, silicone lubricant, vinegar, water floated on top. Water is typically slightly less dense than epoxy and it doesn't wet the epoxy. Ethanol floated on top. And a control. One square will have nothing done to it to act as a control. I made some scenic test samples from 2 pieces of XPS foam, 3 inches square, with a hole in the middle of the top one to act as a pond, and glued together with urethane glue. I smoothed the sides with Sculptamold to ensure the pond was sealed, create a slope up to the level ground, and provide another type of material besides the XPS foam. Surrounding the pond are 4 scenic types: grout from a home improvement store, real dirt from my backyard, TM, Woodland Scenics fine ground foam, and Woodland Scenics 2mm static grass. Last, I put a rock, a log made from a twig, and reeds made from twine in each pond. All the materials were left as is because some people use them that way instead of painting them, and I feel the acrylic varnish duplicates how they would act painted. I used 2 types of resin, Envirotex Light and some generic epoxy resin from Amazon. Any pre-treatments were done, the resin was mixed and poured to near the top of each pond, then any post-pour processing was done, like the water and the ethanol. If you look closely, you may also notice that the final samples are different from the construction and pouring ones. I redid the entire thing. The results of the first set looked interesting, but my errors kind of messed up the results, from overfilling the ponds to making a mess while trying to get an artsy pour shot. Some things to note. Vinegar seemed to dissolve all of the scenics, either the glue holding stuff down or the grout itself. The ground foam wicks the resin quite a bit, as does real dirt from my backyard, TM. The grout doesn't wet very much with anything. I think that may be due to the nature of this specific grout. It's very hard to get it wet even when mixing it with water. Also, in the search for a better static grass glue, on the second batch I used Scotch quick drying craft glue instead of the Aleene's quick dry tacky glue I used on the first. Well, the Scotch glue does dry quickly, it's not nearly tacky enough, so the static grass wound up pretty sparse. Now it is time for the result. Each sample is labeled for the treatment and epoxy resin used, starting with the control and generic epoxy. Since it is easier to speed up the playback than look for a frame that just isn't there, the clips are on the longer side. Feel free to speed it up and pause if you see something to examine more detail. And please hit the like button if you find this useful. In conclusion, nothing completely eliminated the meniscus, but acrylic, PVA, and silicone lubricant did a pretty good job of reducing it and preventing creep into the scenic materials, which is good news as acrylic paint and PVA glue are pretty common scenic materials. Ethanol and water produced no improvement or even degradation, and vinegar made no improvement while damaging the scenic materials. There was no difference I could detect between the name brand Envirotex and the generic epoxy resin. It's probably a good idea to make the edge of any water feature steep to prevent any creep due to overfilling, and to not put any scenic materials at the very edge of the water until the resin is poured and cured if possible. If you enjoyed and would like to see more, please subscribe. As a final word, it looks like a good coating of matte clear acrylic over everything will do the best job of killing the creep. Thanks for watching.